All right, I've convened another IGDN panel to discuss an industry topic, and the topic of my choice tonight was why do people like horror games? Like they're really popular, and I feel like I don't fully understand it. So I have got together three people who have professed to like horror as a genre, have made horror games, and they're going to help us explain this, the answer this mystery for us. So tonight I have with me here, I have Crystal Mazur, who is a contributor to The Black Ballad, to Never Going Home, to Chicago by Night, all well-known horror topics. Probably done a pip system primer about horror or monsters, I'm sure, by this
Yeah.
point. There you go. We also have Megan Jaffe from Nerdy City. I know most recently, kind of their biggest release, they're still kind of promoting it, is Command Droids. But I know some other stuff that preceded that was Video Nasty, or RPG Nasty, I'm sorry, which is inspired by the whole Video Nasty phenomenon. So like the too gross out for public consumption kind of videotape throwback, and Remember X is another game from Nerdy City. So not exactly horror gaming, but it feels pretty adjacent. Feels pretty adjacent.
Suburban 80s horror is the way we like to describe it.
There you go. There you go. And last on my other window here is Craig Campbell of Nerdburger Games. Craig has Nowhereville, the game about the town you can't leave, has Die Laughing, a game about making a horror comedy murder fest. And behind you there, you've got the art, some of the art from the expansion to Good Strong Hands, which is What is Light Without Dark. So again, you've got to have some darkness in there too. So thank you to all three of you for joining me. And I want to start by asking you each to share, like, what's your favorite thing from horror? Like, is it that's it. It was a broad category. What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite like trope or character or thing that a movie does or whatever? What's your favorite thing?
That's a loaded question, Matthew.
Like you started off with like a really hard one.
I may actually have a direct answer for this just because I just started watching a new show last night, and I haven't even finished the first episode, but it's already very appealing to me because it is heavy with symbolism.
Okay.
Particularly like background symbolism, and I'm like, oh yes where's all this going? And that is a particularly strong favorite for me as far as horror goes. It was 1899. I don't remember if I actually said what the thing was, which looks really cool.
Right. I can. That sounds great. I mean, I can see how that is a thing to connect the points and whatever. Yeah, that's great. Crystal, Craig, what's your thing? What's something that just really is like, yes, give me that when you see it show up?
One of the things that I enjoy the most about horror media, movies, TV, comics, games, whatever, is that horror is such a broad category and term. There are so many different variations within it, and even within a game line or related games, or within a movie franchise, you can go so many different directions with it. There are movie franchises, horror franchises, where the villain or monster or the situation that the character's in evolves so specifically into different directions, and they like the subgenre of horror can change from time to time. And within game lines, the same thing happens too. You've got the World of Darkness, which has all these different horror titles in it, but they all have their kind of different bent. Yes, they're horrific and there's scary and terrifying stuff and creepy stuff, but they all can approach it in very different ways. Even like, World of Darkness, like, changeling stuff. It's like there's like it's happy little fairy changeling things, but there's a melancholy and a moroseness and a darkness that is kind of woven into the game. that is so different from the horror that is woven into vampire. And I love watching game lines come out that do different things. I love watching watching like TV shows that reinvent themselves season to season, and movie franchises where they shake things up.
All right. Variety. It's the spice of life, I hear.
I think one of my favorite things is to that feeling that you get like in like a primal feeling of that's just not right. Like you take something normal and you twist it just enough for it to feel wrong. I really, really like that feeling because I like trying to figure out what went wrong. And I know in a horror movie that's going to get me killed. Like I know that. But I like that feeling, and I like exploring that, especially in like role-playing games. You are able to interact with that type of wrongness and try to figure out what's going on, and all of the suspense and thrill that comes along with that.
Okay. I like it. And so I think that's that. So this is just a teaser, an introduction to like some of the things. And I think it's great, like, to get these different answers. And I want to kind of use this as like, okay, those are your favorite ones. But like, as you said, Craig, there's like an expansive amount of things. So like, what is it that makes something a horror piece of media, right? Like, what is it? Is it a matter? I mean, there are so many. Here, I'm trying to answer the question before I even let you guys speak, but like, there are certain things that are like, okay, so if it's got Cthulhu in it or zombies, that gets put in the horror category, right? But those, I mean, like, I don't know that the game like Zombie Dice is really very horrific, right? Just because it's got splatters and brains on the dice symbols. It's quite a stretch to make it a horror game just because it has zombies in it. So what are the things that make something really horror? It isn't just about the genre conventions necessarily, although I bet there's like a feeding back into each other about those things for sure. But like, I don't know if we want to try to come up with a definition, but like, or just explain some of the shape of it. But like, how do you know it's horror, right? Is it like, you know it when you see it, or like, is there more to it than that?
Something that is popping into my head for me is first of all, kind of going back to what Crystal was saying about like wrongness and the timing of that. I've had a bunch of discussions recently about why Jordan Peele is such an incredible horror director, because he has comedians timing, and the like just the timing of a unexpected thing, of a shift in perspective, of like conversion from death to life, or life to death, I should say. I don't know the way around. Both work. Really, I think has an effect on what is horror versus what is like just more action or comedy. I feel like a lot of horror is holding things a beat longer than comedy would. One of the, I don't know if we're going to get into how that works out in games right now. One of the ways that I find out that plays out in games is a lot of the really good horror games that I've been in have or worked on, like, really work to set up a sense of safety first, and then like the timing, the shift, the twist, that's when like that twist in your stomach comes. They're like, oh, this is wrong, this is bad, this is horror.
Yeah, I we could definitely expand more about
we'll
safety tools and
later,
stuff,
but yes.
in a minute. But
yes.
I think that is, at least and maybe this gets to some of the part of the answer too, but like that, what you said about being safe, I guess, is sort of like part of the appeal of it, I suppose.
Yeah,
At
not
least
even safe though, like mundane, like you're like finding a normal for your group and then changing that,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just
altering
meant
that.
that like when
Yeah.
you watch a movie, on some part of your brain it's a movie, and you can just turn it off if you want
Yeah,
to.
that, but
You,
yeah, no, you're right. Also
you
that.
are in control of media in that sense. So I don't know. I don't know if that added anything.
Yeah, well, that's a convention that people fall back on a lot, is the idea of experiencing danger or terror or tension, or in the case of some types of horror media, revulsion, while still knowing that you in fact are safe, that you physically are safe. And the way I've often thought about it is that, and Megan made the comment, or Matthew, you made the comment, like you can turn the thing off at any time. But every minute that you watch the unsettling thing, that you elect not to turn the thing off or pause it or walk away from it or mute it or whatever, that's you welcoming that feeling and being okay with the idea that that is happening to you. And so even though, yes, you know that you are ultimately safe, that there's probably no actual monster in the closet or outside the window, but you are welcoming that. And that's one of the things that horror as a genre, I find most interesting, is that it is a question of you, like you can say, I like to watch a comedy movie. Well, everybody likes to watch a comedy movie. Like, I like to watch a good drama where I get it emotionally invested. Well, everybody likes that. But people who say, I really like to watch a horror movie, really? You like to watch a horror movie? Like, is that the word you want to use? Like, but that's what it is. You are electing, you are choosing to be exposed to that. And it can fall back to anything that Megan or Crystal has said about the wrongness or the timing of things, and how something is presented to you in the worst possible way or at the worst possible time, in the narrative that's being presented, and that you have decided, I'm along for this ride.
I mean, I guess that's why you get a zombie. To take my example, and zombies, we're past peak zombie. Like it was peak zombie for a while, but we're past that now. But
Yes, it was.
but anyway, it's like it's like you're trying to, the movie maker is trying to present something that is unsettling and therefore uses a zombie, not that like, oh, the zombie is going to be unsettling. It's like, I guess, cart before the horse kind of thing. Like it's anything could be unsettling, and this is what the filmmakers that have zombies are choosing to use, or whatever. I just to build on that example that I had before. Crystal, do you have anything to add as far as definition wise, or
I mean,
what makes it horror? What is
like I do feel like the timing aspect is really super important, and that if you ruin the timing of it, you kill all of the build up to what you were going for. For instance, like if you reveal the monster way too soon, that has happened in a couple of movies where they had really great build up, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh well, that's the thing, really. And it kind of loses that momentum, and it loses that suspension of disbelief, where you're getting pulled into that feeling of terror that happens. I also like with the thing with the zombies too, and the irony of what they were originally meant, which was a commentary on capitalism and consumerism, and how they became such big popular media things. And if you draw lines between that, a lot of people are drawn to that, like that, especially like if like fans of the old zombie movies, like that, for that reason, continue to be drawn to that because they're looking at it from a different lens, of that type of lens over that type of media, and just how horrific some of that can actually seem too.
Yeah, and that's the symbolism that you talked about,
Yep.
Megan. I, as you were talking about the timing, I was thinking about like sort of the tension building or whatever. So it's like if you have a scene in a piece of media where somebody opens a door and walks across the room, like, okay, great, that just happens, right? But if they open the door slowly and walk across the room, if hesitatingly, then you are building up that anticipation of suspense, like just because you're stretching out the time, right? That's the kind of thing that you're talking about, Megan, I think.
There's honestly, yes, that's definitely part of it. But like, there are definitely works of comedy that are practically horror for me due to the way that they deal with like timing, especially when it comes to like awkwardness. I've literally had to watch funny shows like with
super cringy.
Yeah,
that is a whole genre of comedy. Yeah.
But yeah, like you can wield that like timing like a weapon. It is.
Matthew, referring to the building tension, like the tension and release is like the best horror does tension and release very, very well. And it doesn't do it the same way every time. You know, you can have like the lighter moment, the character driven moment, even some comedic moments, and then you have the jump scare, or you have the shock moment, or you have the revelation, you know, just like a character revelation or story revelation that's like really unsettling, or you have the build into some sort of tension thing, and sometimes that pays off, and sometimes it goes womp womp, and it tricks you because the next time they're going to try to trick you a different way. And I think that goes to what Megan was saying about Jordan Peele. Like he varies how those things happen. And the best horror directors and stories, the best horror stories vary that. So you can never predict. Like if it's literally just, okay, we'll have a quiet little moment and then we'll have a fight with the monster, and then we'll have a quiet little moment and then we'll have a fight with the monster, and the setup to the fight with the monster is similar every time. That's not satisfying. That gets repetitive very, very quickly. But if the confrontation with the monster, or the confrontation with the human who's being monstrous, or the jump scare, or whatever that you're setting up to each time varies, then you're always on your heels. And you, as a consumer of that particular media, whether you're playing a game or watching a story passively in front of you, you are, you're thrown back, you're thrown off by that every time. So like it makes for a more satisfying. And when you are able to predict it, then that's its own little special win. Well, I knew it was going to be this time.
Well, I was going to ask about that. And like, I mean, I think a lot of genres are sort of like, they rely on like a savvy consumer sort of or like a informed watcher of the media, you know? So like, if you get this, like you're talking about the syncopation or like the build up and the release, like that's how you watch it, and you know those things. And so like, does it, I don't know. I mean, like how many horror movies do you have to watch before like the tricks don't work anymore? I don't know. Like anybody hit that limit yet?
I'm not. So I wish I had my friend Gia here with me, who helped us with RPG Nasty, because like I am but a novice in horror, because she is really one of these people who watches horror like constantly, but I think then like recognizes those patterns, but in such a way that like she just enjoys watching them play out, and how that changes with each new like take on horror media. So yeah, I like atmospheric criti horror for the most part. But yeah, I do feel that there is, that for connoisseurs of horror, that there is like sort of a internal language that you kind of learn of what horror is, that can help you to continue to consume it.
Yeah, like I've worked, I grew up working and volunteering for a haunted house. And so a lot of the jump scares and stuff like that don't get me, but it's the build up to it. And then I know that that's ooh, that's a good moment, and then I can see what's happening after between it. Like as someone who loves horror and isn't really affected by the jump scares or stuff like that anymore, I still appreciate when they're done like really, really well.
Oh, is that like what Craig was saying, where it's like, oh, I know it's coming. Here it is. Here it is. Get ready for it.
Yeah,
And then,
Oh
like
man.
one of the best ones was Resident Evil, the very first movie, when they
Hmm.
walk past the doctor that's in the flooded tank, and then like they flash back and her
oh, yeah.
eyes open.
Yeah, anything in a tank,
Like
you know that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
that was a fantastic moment and a great like little mini jump scare that is building up to all of the other things that happen later.
The-
Spoiler alert if you need that.
Oh, yeah. My favorite is Exorcist 3. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a bit where there's this nurse who's just walking back and forth in an empty like hospital aisle or hallway, and you just know. You don't know when, but you know. And it's
Yeah.
so they just draw it out to like
And
the
no
last
dialogue, and it just
None.
goes and goes and
goes and goes
and you see other characters and they do
Perfect.
things, and so like the
Yep.
camera shifts to something else and then it comes
Yep.
back and you're like, oh, now we're back with her.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been there in that respect. I have unsurprisingly read a lot of Stephen King, and I had read a lot of early stuff like through the 80s and into the very early 90s, and there was like one or two books that I just kind of never got around to, and eventually I did in college get around to, and I thought I understood Stephen King stories and I knew what to expect in a Stephen King story. And then I read Pet Sematary, and I was not prepared for the first 100 pages of that, where the tension and release it's there, but you've introduced this road where these trucks go by very, very fast all the time. And then there's a little toddler who is wandering around. And it becomes very clear, because this is a Stephen King story, that at some point, one of those trucks is going to hit that kid. And it takes a long time to get there. And it is just impending dread through the whole thing. And there's little bits of like, oh, is it going to be now? Is this the point? Is it going to happen along with another character? Or is like, but you just know all the time. And that's not something that necessarily happens in all of his stories. And so that's the thing. It's just like when somebody mixes it up, there's always a new way to experience it, because even if I kind of experience that, I might go I might go 10 years before I read a book or watch a movie that has that kind of foreboding dread that takes you half of the media to get to the the quote unquote payoff or the event to take place. Yeah. And then it doesn't get any better after that. Like things go even worse after that. But yeah, like a good horror storyteller and a good group playing the game and understanding what horror can do.
Yes.
Can always surprise you. And it can be the players that surprise the group as well. It doesn't have to be just how the GM presents the challenges in the story.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
So you mentioned halfway through, and I am going to take this as an opportunity to ask my next question, which is kind of, you mentioned it before, Craig, half and half kind of genres. So like, what are two great tastes that taste great together, and horror and what? And we'll talk about that. So I want to know about like like I said, I want to know about like the taste that tastes great together when horror plus what? Because like you're talking about stuff in a tank, Crystal, and of course what I think of is Aliens, where you've got a thing in a tank that's still alive because it's a weird sci-fi monster, and that movie has a bunch of those horror elements, and even more so Alien, which is the one that came before, right? I mean, but it's also got like, it's set in space, and it's got aliens, and it's got weird planets that are uninhabitable. It's got a lot of sci-fi, but then it's got a lot of horror too. So what are quickly, I think, what are some of your favorite things to mix together? And then I think we really should start talking about games, because we're all game makers here. But I don't know, what's a favorite to mix together?
So two of the ones I love, horror comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those people that I love what that release of tension is with the comedy part. And then I also love horror and fantasy mixed together. That's one of the things that I absolutely love and I'm drawn to like every single time that it comes out.
So like,
You stole my horror comedy.
yeah,
No.
But that's
I mean,
okay.
we love a
it's not a
horror
draft.
comedy.
It's not a draft. You can you can all have horror comedy.
As an addendum to that, like great horror comedy when the horrific thing that's happening is also funny and you feel a little bad for laughing at the horrific thing that's happening. And Tucker and Dale versus Evil does that really, really well when you see these young adults getting killed in but getting themselves killed in ridiculous ways where it's funny as it happens. Like I'm laughing as the guy's going through the wood chipper because of how the supposed bad guy is also reacting to this and having this over the top cartoony reaction. And you're like, but the person is dying. Like this is really terrible too. But one of the things that I love going on like the opposite end of all of that is horror that also delves into real human condition kind of stuff. I find the Hellraiser series, at least like the first two plus the remake that they did, being really good at that. The new Evil Dead movie, Evil Dead Rise, is surprisingly deep in its exploration of human beings going through some really difficult things and having some difficult relationship issues while this really horrific thing is happening to all of them, and how they deal with each other and their own problems, while also trying to survive this onslaught of deadites or Cenobites. I love those movies and stories that do that in general.
I feel like Magnus Archives kind of slots into that kind of horror really well, which is that's been one that's been great recently. It's horror that's just talking about what it is to be scared and how people are scared, and it's great. Love a horror comedy. I think my twist on the second one is horror spectacle. Like gothic, it can, and that can range from fantasy to sci-fi to like so it can range from like the end of 2001 to like Crimson Peak to what are some of the other things? It's a Hellraiser. Hellraiser is another great one that just like that, I think, is cosmic horror in a way. It's horror, but it also takes your breath away a little bit. And I love that.
The movie Underwater does a really good job of that.
Yep. One of my favorites has been Junji Ito Maniac, which is Japanese horror, which is in a whole other genre of itself. It is not for the faint of heart. But Maniac kind of takes a little bit of elements of, weirdly enough, Studio Ghibli type of animation style and presentation of some of the monsters, and puts it in like a horror aspect. So it is horrific, but it is also quite delightful if you are into that type of thing.
I mean that's sort of like the whole, all the genres are that way. It's terrible. Don't watch it unless you like it. And it's good for you.
No one should watch this except for me.
All right. So we're gonna end with some more recommendations. So I think keep those ready. But I think we should talk about games specifically and some of this, like, I mean, is it just as, so I have found that like I made a horror game despite like the whole premise of this panel discussion being that I don't identify as like a person who likes horror. And I've played it with people who are fans of horror, and I say stuff to them at the table and they're like, oh, that's awful. So like, I guess I'm doing something right, but like, I don't, it's on one level, it's like context, right? We're like, okay, this is a terrible situation and you're all in this terrible situation, so then this happens and then everyone's like, oh, that's terrible, and like I think that gets you a long way there, at least, because of that table setting where you're like session zero kind of stuff, where you're like, this is going to be a thing and your characters aren't going to like it, and then I tell you what happens, and even though what I said was it smells like roses, you all know that that's bad for whatever reason, because all the setup has been that that's bad. So like, I don't know, is it as easy as that? I mean, it can be, I guess, but there's probably more to it than that. And you all, I want to hear what you've done at a table. Either we could maybe talk about GM stuff as well, but like specifically game design, and what does it well, what makes some of these feelings of like the list, the revulsion, or the fascination, or the just all wrongness of it. The mailbox has teeth. Why does it have teeth? No one knows. That's terrible. Whatever it is that I don't know. So I have this habit of going on at length and not actually asking a question. So like, all of that setup is like, really what I'm trying to ask is like, what kind of things specifically do you put in games, setting wise, or particularly mechanics wise as well, to capture some of these feelings of revulsion, or the feelings of repulsion, or the feelings of fascination, or loss of control? Like all those kind of things can be part of games. What do you put in? What do you put into games to make them horror games?
I'm like you, Matthew, in that like when I'm like, oh, that's really cool, everyone else at the table is like, oh my God, what is going on? But I feel like what I like to do is I like to drop little snippets of information, but only partial stuff, where the characters don't have to look for it, they don't have to search for it, they get it, but they don't know the whole story. So like one of the things that I did in my D&D campaign is that my paladin in the group as the GM started realizing that the goddess that they worship was not right, and slowly came to find out that the god had been killed and replaced by something else, and he was worshiping that. And that was absolutely horrific for him and his character. But he didn't find that out all at once. He found that out very, very slowly throughout the time, as he realized that like the stuff and his conversations with the god weren't making sense, and all of that stuff. So I like to do like little small snippets of things, and then let everybody else kind of fill in those missing pieces in their own mind, because they're going to build something way more horrific than I'm ever going to be able to.
Right, and that's, don't show the shark. That's the
Yep.
That's the
Yeah, that's the principle. It reminds me of one of the first real horror games that I played in, which was Cult. And it was back in the day, and just by describing like what the sun looked like outside, just like, and he changed it just slightly different, we eventually put together that the city that we were in had descended into hell while we were busy with other shit.
Oops.
Yeah, whoopsie.
Welcome to Cult.
Yeah.
If you haven't played it, it's amazing. You should, if you're like a fan of horror. So yeah.
And yeah, that sort of like incremental change and like constantly adding smaller pieces to the puzzle is a lot of the way that we try to build horror with like Remembrance and Command Droids, because they're more like you get a very sort of grounded mundane start, and then you enter into this weird world, but like the mundane start is important, and then you sort of that like gives you the grounding to like build whatever weird little puzzle and spookiness are to come. With our actual horror game in a completely different direction, which is laying it out all out, because that's more horror comedy. And I'm really curious to hear what Craig has to say after this, because what we did with it was they just kind of lay it all out. And it's all right, you know, write down the cut list, write down the list of the things that you don't want to talk about or experience within this. Like the eyes, no, great. Things like that. But then there's the shot list of, I want to see someone's head taken off with a ceiling fan, or I'd like to see someone mashed between two refrigerators, or whatever. And you just write out this whole list. And so whenever a character dies, they can use that list as inspiration because they describe their death, which is how we kind of got around because video nasties are particularly, you know, they're nasty and exploitative and gross. And this gives you the agency to get as filthy as you want to with it. But because you're describing your own death, like that kind of keeps you within your comfort zone, helps to keep you within that comfort zone. So that's how we go from like our more atmospheric horror stuff to our wackier, sloppier horror stuff.
I do love the concept of a cut list and a shot list that, like, you know, I mean, it's great. It's great. This is out. This is in. You know, it's a safety tool, but the theme is in there, and the safety tool too.
Stealing that for Die Laughing in the future. Die Laughing.
We should
second edition
our games for each other.
Yeah.
Die Laughingist.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to see in a horror game, whether I'm playing or GMing, or, you know, even designing and kind of thinking about how you're going to present that stuff, and give the GM tools to create these things. And in some cases permission to do it, because, like, you know, like a lot of people like to say, well, the designer doesn't need to give me permission to do anything. That may be true for you, but like some players, some GMs, some readers are going to be like, oh, the GM said, or the writer says, do this, like, this is okay to do. This is in keeping with what they intend the game to be. Yeah. And that sparks creativity and so forth. But it actually kind of gets back to the comment I made about the human experience, that, and I'm going to borrow from a movie that we've all seen, but talk about a game, the Alien game, which is, okay, blowing away xenomorphs is a lot of fun. And it's really deadly, and it can be very tense, and you can create some great tension, and be overwhelmed by too many of them, or there's face huggers skittering around and you don't have a weapon that's really going to deal with them well. And so you have to makeshift and improvise. But when the point where the Alien movies, and I think probably the games, get the most interesting too, is when we see the monster in humanity, is when the Burke character decides, you're like, I can make money off of you. I can serve the company and get something for you. Or the Gorman character, who is just not field ready and is going to make decisions that get people in dangerous situations and get people killed. And I personally would love to play in an Alien game where I can play the Gorman character. I want to have authority, and I want to make terrible decisions, because too often I think people take it unto themselves when running or GMing a game, is that, like, it's okay, you're trying to beat the GM's monsters or killer or whatever it is that you're up against, and you're going to try to make the smartest choices you possibly can. And that happens in some horror stories. There are horror stories where the characters make incredibly intelligent decisions and things still go poorly. Tremors is a great example. Everybody in that movie, with the exception of one or two of the kids, makes really intelligent choices, but they're not prepared for outcomes to take place. Tremors is, in my opinion, a perfect movie in that regard. But if I'm playing a game, I want somebody to, like, I want the group to make a bad decision, to be like, this is the way to handle the monster. We're going to, get out the chainsaws, even though you know that is going to go horribly when the chainsaw starts skittering around on its own because somebody dropped it. Or break out the flamethrower, next to the other flamethrower.
Right.
Like, that's a terrible idea. And should bite you in the ass in a horror story. In an action movie, that should be awesome. You should blow up use one flamethrower to blow up the other flamethrower and all the monsters get killed. Hooray. It's an action movie. Say your catchphrase and move along. In a horror movie, that explosion needs to light up characters. Ideally the players are on board for that ride and they expect that sort of thing's going to happen. If the buy-in, and this can be part of what Megan was talking about, the buy-in at the beginning is like, bad things are going to happen even when you make the right decision or make the best possible decision, and everybody's on board for that's the experience we're getting out of the game. And it's not about beating the monster. It's about telling a good horror story, which often involves very bad decisions and characters dying.
Yes.
Yeah, I recently had the opportunity to play Call of Cthulhu on a live stream, and I'd never played it before, but it is definitely I think it's a feature of the game, but also it is that particular channel, the Symphony Entertainment channel, like they're like that's their whole channel is like, we are here for you to make terrible decisions and drive yourself to the brink, and that is like what everybody cheers for. So like no one is supposed to survive playing that game or a game on that channel. Yeah, I mean that is it, that's it, but then what I'm saying is just echoing, yes, that for some people that is the point of the story, is like, yes, they want to see that character make the bad decisions or the character being unprepared or whatever. Yeah.
Or make the good decision and still have it bite you in the ass.
Right.
Just
right.
maybe just a little bit less, but it's still bad.
Well, yeah. And then you
because
get
it's a horror story.
Well, yeah, you get like the valiant stand against the impossible odds or whatever is another way to end in that situation, I guess.
Speaking to what Craig was talking about with sort of Alien specifically in the human condition thing, one of the ways that we set that up is like, you have your monster, and then you have your antagonists. So like Weyland Yutani is the antagonist, Alien is the monster. You have to deal with both of them, and there's a lot of horror in that, because even if you make the right decisions to fight the monster, you can't get out from under the thumb of the antagonist. Or if you make a choice to get out from it, that's been some really interesting ones where in order to escape the antagonist, you go with the monster. that can be fun too.
Well, that's almost a whole other
that's sort of its own genre.
I was going to say, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's almost its whole own genre, where it's like,
join
we got to team up with the werewolves to fight
Mhm.
To fight capitalism or whatever it is that is in your movie.
One of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite things to do as a GM, especially in a horror game, is to give every character a goal that is counterintuitive against the group. Because you're either going to watch them team up to fight the monster and then stab each other in the back, or they're going to set aside whatever they were going to do to try and figure out and see who's going to double cross who. So like, again, with safety tools and stuff, you want to make sure that your players are aware of that, that they are going to have that as part of their, and that you don't know what everyone is looking for. But it can add for some really interesting role play dynamic and choices that you may not come across otherwise.
We've mentioned safety tools a few times, and we probably should take a little bit of a few minutes at least to if somehow this is the first video that someone has watched about role-playing games or the indie scene or whatever, what are safety tools and what are some of your favorites to use, especially when you're in horror situations? I mean, you're the panelist. You tell us. What are what is safety tools? What does that even mean? What does that look like at the table? How do you use it?
So I talk about this in like every single horror panel,
Yeah, I'm
because
sure you.
for me it's super important.
Mhm.
But
It is.
basically, oh, sorry.
No, it is important.
Yeah.
We've mentioned it a few times, so let's do it. Go ahead.
So safety tools are basically like you're consenting to this stuff, and there's stuff that you don't consent to. And so it is a way for you to be able to tell as a GM and other players who consents to what. And everybody at the table, including the GM, has to be able to consent to everything. Because there's stuff as a GM that I will not storytell, and I do not consent to storytelling. And so everybody has a buy-in, and there's always limits, and there's always times where you don't realize exactly what bothered you until it bothers you. And that's where the safety tools step in. So
That's good.
I think lines and veils,
Mm.
we've already kind of alluded to. That one gets used a lot. It's a good one to do like before the campaign starts, where everybody just says, okay, these are the things that I don't want to see at all. These are the things that it's okay if they're there, but let's not dwell on them.
They're sort of off screen.
Those are veils. Those are things that you're like, yeah, you can, well, we'll mention that this terrible thing is happening, but then we're going to cut away from it. And you're not gonna spend the scene dealing with it. And then like when you play, there's, when you're in the midst of playing, there's all sorts of options. I mean, one of my favorite, I recommended in quite a few of my games, is script change, because it plays a lot like, fast forward, rewind, stop, pause. Like we all know
I love that.
It's created by Thoughty. You can find it online. Great. And it's a fallback that everybody knows how something gets recorded on video or audio, and you could just kind of use those tools. And you just like, if something starts to go in a direction that you're not like, hey, this is no good, you can pause, rewind. We can change the spiders to cockroaches because somebody like had a terrible experience with spiders as a child and doesn't want to deal with spiders in a game. Whatever they're and for the record, expounding on what everything Crystal was saying too, is it's a consent-based kind of situation, and nobody owes anybody an explanation. You don't have to tell anybody. Like I explain why that person doesn't, but you can just say none of this, and everybody goes okie dokie, and that's it. You like nobody's on the spot to like explain their trauma. That's ridiculous.
It's not therapy; it's a game.
Right.
And
very
so
important.
That's one that I like a lot.
Yeah. I think the one that I used that I mentioned that game of Call of Cthulhu, and it was that it was just red, yellow, green kind of stuff. Like, every once in a while the game master would be like, all right, everybody still green on this? We're good. Thumbs up if you're green. Okay. And then we kept going. It was stoplighty, I guess it's the colors, but like it was, if we're good to go, let's keep going,
I use the X card specifically for convention games and stuff like that, because you're not building a rapport with a lot of those people. They're people that are going to sit down with you for 2 to 4 years. And so you can't really get to know them. And so I usually do an X card, which is that they literally can either go like this if they're virtual, or they can touch a card that has a big X on it, or they can say no, and then we just stop and move on. So
that one is good for conventions because it's simple to explain.
Yeah.
A lot of people who game already know it. Like it falls into use very easily.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's physical, which I think also helps, rather than having to try to remember a word. Like a lot of times we've sort of come up with, just in the games that we've been running in-house, like more sort of diegetic safe words, if that's the best, but just for things stopping in the middle, or just for removing a thing. I love script change, and I'm gonna have to look that up after, because we do use a lot of like sort of VCR type terms within the Rememorex world. So script change is honestly beautiful as a just, we're gonna
All right, that's enough of
we're just
that.
gonna,
Fast
yeah,
forward.
we'll skip past that.
Fast forward to the
Yeah,
next scene.
and I've used red, yellow, green at cons before, but I really like the X card. And I should remember to use that more.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, we always put an X card in our games. I had somebody that was like, "You're just trying to fill up more pages," and I'm like, "No, we don't expect anyone to rip out the last page of the book, but if you want to, there it is. It's an X on a page. It's that simple." And we weren't trying to fill word count or whatever, because whatever. We want to put it in there for you to use it. It's just put an X on a piece of paper. It's very easy to make one. You don't have to print ours out from the last page of the book. But you can, if you wanted to, that it would look thematic to the game you're playing. Anyway, X card, good. So yeah, so you've got buy-in, you've got some tools. We've talked about GM stuff. Are there any, like, I mean, we're kind of like maybe getting toward the end of the discussion here, but like, is there any specific mechanics that you really like in a game that like really captures some of that stuff that we talked about at the beginning of the discussion about, like, is there a dread level or like a timeline, like a countdown? Like, is there any kind of stuff like that? I mean, I know those are mechanics that exist, but like, have you seen them implemented well in a particular game that you want to mention? Like something that is really not about that is really integral to the game. That's like, it's something you're doing at the table, something you're keeping track of, something that's like, oh, that's the third time the secret word has been said. So like now we mark another check mark, and like, doom approaches and like, I don't know, what kind of stuff do you like as far as that goes, as far as like, stuff that's actually mechanics, gameplay mechanics.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention dread just
Yeah, I
in
was gonna
general.
say,
Yeah.
you mentioned
Dread.
dread. Like, that's
Well,
one of the best ones.
10
I didn't-
candles. That's another one that's amazing.
Which one?
It's 10 candles.
Oh, the 10 candles.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both tension-based mechanics. In
Yes.
10 candles, you're blowing out candles as you go,
Mhm.
which is lowering the lighting level that you're playing in, and a visual cue to what's going on. Dread uses a Jenga tower. Whenever you do like big moments, risky things, you have to pull a Jenga block, and when the tower falls, somebody dies or something else terrible happens. And so they're non-dice mechanics that deal with tension very, very well.
Also, it kind of vacillates for me on times I played it between horror and tragedy, but A Quiet Year, I find also just the way that it is circumscribed by the year gives it like, you've got this long to deal with this world that you're building and to enjoy it or not. And yeah, that's a slower one, but that's one that I like.
Yeah, I've not played that one, but
it's a great game.
I've played a game inspired by it, so it's it's like, in that one, it's like dawn comes eventually, right? You've got horror stuff, and then dawn comes eventually, so it's like, the stack of the deck is only so big, you're going through it to get to the end, and like, there is sort of like a table presence to that decreasing stack of cards, I guess. Well, any other games in particular that anyone wants to mention?
Bluebeard's Bride.
Oh,
Bluebeard's Bride.
yeah.
I know.
Favorites.
Yeah.
Oh, tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, so Bluebeard's Bride is based off of the fairy tale for Bluebeard, where he marries a woman, and she goes and she finds all of these signs that he is not who he is saying he is, and he's trying to convince her otherwise, and you are playing essentially aspects of the same individual. Every character is a different part, and you are trying to decide if what you are seeing is real or if what you are seeing is made up and a fantasy. And the ending of the story is you have to decide whether it's true or not, and go from there. And there are some other things that happen throughout the gameplay where secrets are revealed within your aspects of who you are playing, and that can have really interesting consequences throughout each of the scenes. So
I mean, sounds. I've
Um,
seen the art does a lot for that book as well. The creepy.
the art
creepy,
is gorgeous. I've played it a
art.
couple times, and yeah, it's one of my favorite games, like horror games.
Nice.
we mentioned vampire earlier. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Wraith. Because
Yes.
that
Wraith
that-
is a great one too.
Is that Ghost Hunters? Like
no, you are
what
dead.
is-
You
okay,
are dead,
you're dead.
and you are in the society of the dead. And you also have a shadow, which is one of the other players, which is trying to convince you to stop this foolish human nonsense and just kind of dive into the void, or worse. And that one, properly run, can be deeply spooky. There's some other good ones.
I think a lot of the World of Darkness games have their own interesting take on how everything
Yes.
goes. Like with Vampire, of course, there's like your humanity versus the beast. Like you're a human person, but there's this thing living inside of you, and you're constantly balancing that. And in order to do the cool vampire stuff you want to do, you kind of have to give in. And and it, how it's handled varies a little bit depending on the edition of the game that you're dealing with.
Yes.
But it all boils down to, again, I find myself falling back to like the human condition of like what horrible atrocities are you willing to commit in order to attain your goals, which may be very human goals, and may actually in some cases be benevolent to some other people. You might be helping somebody else, but you're going to do some terrible things in the process, and that's going to teeter you on the edge. And there's a certain tension that comes into that too. Like the lower your humanity is, the riskier everything becomes. And
Right. I think we've done it. So I want to end with some final outro introductions. You can tell people where you can be found on the internet if you want to discuss your favorite movies and your favorite games with these creators. Where can you find you? And the other thing is give a recommendation. Like we've said a lot of games, we've said a lot of movies, but like a specific one that's like, and it doesn't have to be your favorite, it doesn't have to be the most recent one you saw, but just one more recommendation of some piece of media that's like, go check this out, and then tell us where people can find you. So let's we can go around in the reverse order of the introductions. If I remember which ones I did first, I think I ended with you, Craig. So why don't you give us a final recommendation and your places on the internet?
Sure. I'm Craig Campbell. I own Nerdburger Games. I've designed a bunch of stuff. I've gotten nominated for any awards a few times. And some of those games are horror games like Nowhereville, and Die Laughing. And then there's games that have aspects of horror in them, like Good Strong Hands. And I've been told unequivocally that Code Warriors has body horror going on big time. Although it's with computer programs, not people. You can find me at Nerdburger Craig on Twitter, and Dice Camp at Mastodon, and my website is nerdburgergames.com. The games are all at Drive-Thru RPG. I'll be at Gen Con this year. I'll be at other conventions, PAX Unplugged later in the year. And my recommendation right now is, because I mentioned it to Matthew earlier, I finally got around to watching Dark Skies, which was on TNT. It wrapped up in, I think, 2015. Ran for 5 seasons. It's a story of the alien invasion takes place, and we are starting the story in the first episode 8 months after humanity has fallen, and what's left of humanity is fighting back. And it's heavy sci-fi, heavy on the sci-fi elements, but there are certainly horror aspects to it, including some kind of body horror and mind control, and losing who you are as a human. Due to the alien stuff, but also due to the inhumanity of war. And I want to make this comment for Matthew too. You say you made a horror game and you're not really a horror person. Well, you can also think of it as you made a war RPG. And if you dig down deep enough in most war stories, it is also a horror story.
Oh, but yeah, that's I mean, that's not even the secret of Never Going Home. That's just the text of Never Going Home.
That's what it says on the tin.
I think Megan, I don't know who I don't remember who I did first or last, but Megan, what's your outro? What's
Megan
one more
Jaffe.
recommendation?
I'm gonna give my information first and then the recommendation, because I'm still like cogitating on it a little bit. If you haven't read the original book for Lovecraft Country, do that. That I actually haven't seen the show yet. I need to get around to it because I've heard they've done some amazing stuff from it. But the book is incredible, and it's Lovecraftian horror is so much fucking less scary than racism. So it's an excellent book. And you can find me on the internet at Nerdy City on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm avoiding the Twitter hell site at present. You can also find me on Tumblr there. And we are at nerdycity.com, and you can find all of our books through Drive-Thru RPG, where we have RPG Nasty, our gross out horror fun one-shot game, and Rememrex and Commandroids, which are our horror inflected 80s nostalgia romps and other stuff.
What's the price for RPG Nasty? Because
$6.66.
as it should be. As it should be.
We may actually have to raise it because the real world is horror.
Yes, the real well.
But for a long time, it's been $6.66, and I loved that joke. But
it's
hooray, capitalism.
Yeah, it is as it should be. But yeah, you also got to get paid. Crystal, wrap us up here. Tell us what's a final recommendation of a horror media to check out, and where can people hear more from you?
So my horror recommendation is going to be Kids on Bikes, which, if you like Stranger Things, or if you've seen the Amazon Prime show Paper Girls, it's essentially you play teenagers trying to solve strange things and witness strange things and what happens with that. And you can find me for social media, Body and Soul 152 on almost every single platform, and my website is thegeekypanda.com. If you're going to be at Gen Con, I will also be there hosting.
Oh yeah, I'll be there too.
I'm hosting 3 horror panels, so you can find those on the events list. So yeah.
Excellent. I was told last year at Gen Con that I should listen to Magnus Archives, and I did start listening to it. So I have listened to a few episodes. So I guess that'll be my recommendation for anyone, because I listen to podcasts all the time.
Oh, strap in.
Magnus
Archives. I'm only like 7 episodes in. I haven't listened to that many, but
it gets so good.
Strap in.
That's what everybody told me last year, and I have taken the advice. I have begun the process.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I'm just a little ahead of you.
And you can find my name is Matt Orr. You can find what I'm up to at wetinkgames.com or Wet Ink Games on most of the socials, Instagram and Facebook and YouTube videos as well. So that's us. thank you again to my panelists, to Craig, to Megan and Crystal for joining me to discuss this horror and all of its aspects, particularly in gaming. Thank you, and thank you for watching. We'll see you at the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.